Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Budd, and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Events with Life Sciences BC. And very welcome to the last event of the season. So we're thrilled you're able to join us today. So just some housekeeping before we get started. There is a chat function on your screens there. We encourage you to use that as the event goes on. And if you have comments or thoughts, please put it in there. Also, you'll see there's the top right 4 arrows, which will show a full screen if you click on that for any of the slides. There is a Q&A section, and so please put any questions that you have for any of the presenters there. They will be able to answer that by typing in the answers there, and also you can upvote. So if there's a question in particular of interest you think that everybody would like to hear the answer to, please do that. Afterwards, we encourage you to stay around for some, after the Q&A, some networking. There's going to be 2 8-minute sessions, and so you can go from table to table. Please move to the front of the room when we go back to networking. To move around, you double-click on any empty chair to move from table to table. And we encourage you to introduce yourself there, and then network and have a chat with people at the table. But please wait for a break before you move to a different table just to avoid any disruption. Also a reminder, when we go to the networking, please turn on your camera and your microphone so that everybody is able to see you. And you can upload your picture and social media links to make it easier to network. And I'd now like to introduce Wendy Herbert, our President and CEO, who will be joining us shortly. So, but before we do, we're going to actually get the event started. So I would like to acknowledge that I am joining the event from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I would also like to acknowledge that others joining us from other traditional and unceded Indigenous territories across this beautiful province, country, and around the world. So welcome to today's webinar, and thank you all for joining us. We are excited to be here electronically and to host this event virtually. Over the past year, Life Sciences BC and our community have fortunately embraced virtual events. We are grateful that we're able to continue to host webinars and events to bring our ecosystem together. However, no, we're all very excited to get together when it is safe to do so in person. And we are very excited about today's event, the McCarthy Spotlight Speaking Series, How Digital Health is Transforming Healthcare. This webinar will feature presentations from organizations working in the digital health space. Attendees can learn how innovation is facilitating a transformation of healthcare delivery and better health outcomes. Digital health allows for the improvement of integration between healthcare systems, eliminates geographical barriers, and provides advancements in the areas such as artificial intelligence and precision medicine. Life Sciences BC is a not-for-profit organization. Our members consist of academia, research institutions, centers of excellence, and funding agencies, emerging, small and medium-sized and growing digital health, medtech, therapeutic companies, and those companies that support the broader life sciences ecosystem. We are funded through memberships and the generous contributions of our sponsors and partners. Today's event was made possible by the support of our event sponsor, McCarthy Tetro, and David Frost, partner. Thank you for your investment in Life Sciences BC, and the life sciences ecosystem is invaluable, and we are thankful for your support. At each event, we like to announce our newest members. So I very much like to give a very special welcome to our newest members, who include the Brighton Group Health Industry Solutions, Canary Medical, and RBC Insurance Agency. We are always welcoming new members, and in fact, I'm very pleased to let you know that so far this year we have welcomed 45 new members. So for all of the new members, welcome, and also for any of you joining us today who are not our members, please reach out to any of us at Life Sciences BC or go to our website lifesciencesbc.ca for more information on how to become a member. So now on with the program. It gives me great pleasure to introduce David Frost, who is a partner at McCarthy Tetro. So David, if I could ask for you to turn on your camera, please. So David is a partner in the Vancouver office of McCarthy Tetro and co-chair of its National Life Sciences Group. He practices in the areas of corporate and commercial law, securities and corporate finance, with a focus on financing and merger and acquisition transactions involving biotech companies. David regularly advises private and public issuers and dealers on cross-border U.S. and domestic public and private offerings of equity and debt, including initial public offerings, bond deal financing, and secondary offerings. He also advises public companies on general securities law matters, including continuous disclosure obligations and other regulatory compliance issues. David regularly acts for Canadian, U.S., and international acquirers and targets on domestic and cross-border merger and acquisition transactions and takeover bids. He also advises Canadian and U.S. venture capital investors in connection with the structuring and implementation of domestic and cross-border investments. David has been recognized by LexExpert as a leading lawyer in health sciences and corporate mid-market work, and a financial and corporate law star by LMG Life Sciences. And also, David has been a long time and great supporter of Life Sciences BC, and it's always a pleasure working with him to plan these events. So now over to David to say some introductions and introduce our first speaker.
Thanks very much, Ryan, and welcome everyone to the latest version of the McCarthy Spotlight Speaker Series. When we put these programs together, we always strive to find something that will be of interest to the membership and the life sciences community at large. And with the number of attendees at this event, I really think we've struck a chord with everyone. So I'm pretty excited about today's agenda and speakers. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, is David Helliwell. David is a software entrepreneur who co-founded Thrive Health, a software company with a mission to improve the delivery of healthcare in Canada and beyond by empowering patients to be more informed and engaged in their journeys through specialist care. An important element of Thrive's focus is measuring and enhancing the well-being of patients and caregivers, leading to improved levels of physical and mental health. Thrive Health is the official developer of the BC and Canada COVID-19 apps, which have provided over 10 million risk assessments to Canadians during the pandemic. Over to you, David.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Now I will share my screen here. And one more. Great. So thanks everybody for joining. So yeah, just briefly, as you said, for where we come from at Thrive, it's really about making the healthcare system work better for everyone. And we can get into that a little bit, but so I've been asked to take a big look at the big picture of digital health and how that's going to change into the future. I'm not going to get into the stuff around virtual care and AI and wearables and at-home monitoring and a lot of those things that are just a typical part of most of the discussions around digital health. Because I'll be honest, I have a little bit of an aversion to the whole thing of digital health because in my opinion, all health should be digital. So hopefully it'll just be healthcare soon. But there are a couple of elements that I wanted to dive into of real fundamental changes that are possible in the improvement of running the healthcare system to make it work better for everyone that can be drastically accelerated with the use of digital tools. So before jumping in, a little bit of a framework that's useful. It's one downer is not being able to look around the room for a show of hands, but I'm assuming that a number of you have read the Innovator's Prescription by Clayton Christensen. So it's he basically just takes the Innovator's Dilemma model and applies it in different areas. And so here it was applied to primarily the U.S. healthcare system, but a lot of things that apply well to us. So we've got solutions. So really, he talks about business models and ways that innovations can come in that are going to be disruptive to entire industries. So solution shops that are like general hospitals, value-added processes that are like hip and knee replacements, where it's just one surgical center that does only that very efficiently, and then facilitated networks for chronic diseases. What's interesting with this is today in our healthcare system, much too much is done in solution shops, so general hospitals. So it's like having high-end strategy consultants doing everything where it could be more of a production line. So I'm just putting this in the back of your heads as a little bit of a model for how digital health really, we want to be moving things out of solution shops if they can go into a value-added process. And there are a lot of tools that can allow quick assessments to keep people out of these very high costs, and for the case of general hospitals, can be quite dangerous for patients as well. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So there are a couple of areas that are not that well known about how having patients and families more involved in their own healthcare can really drive, not just better health outcomes, but also a much more efficient system. These aren't Canadian data. These are U.S. data that I'm showing here around claims and lawsuits against doctors. And so the story that I'm trying to support with these data are that enabling doctors and caregivers to have more open communications with their patients, and also more honest communications with their patients, lead to not just better health outcomes, but patients, if there is a problem, they're much less likely to sue the doctor if they've been well informed, and the doctor is being faster to admit that there are mistakes. And so it's a shame that, so this isn't a pure digital health thing, but by having easy tools that are available to communicate information between doctors and patients, it can not only make the patients feel more engaged, but also help the doctors to get sued less and to have the whole system be a lot more efficient. So I'm assuming everybody can read it, but it's quite dramatic. It's almost a 4 times reduction in actual claims being made, and then an even bigger than 6 times plus reduction in actual lawsuits coming, just by sharing more information and being more open. And so this is linking to another theme that is really important to us at Thrive Health, which is the importance of having trust and and actual relationships between people going through healthcare journeys. Another angle in terms of the communication element that's quite dramatic. Again, this is another U.S. study. So these are people coming into the emergency department for heart problems, and the striking one is the bar chart on the right there. So these are patients being discharged, and the patient thinks they have an 80% chance of dying at home from a heart attack after their conversation with the Emerge doc. The Emerge doc thought that same patient had a 15% chance. And this is something that we spend a lot of time on, and digital health can be huge, because you've got this moment of, particularly after you've gone to the hospital after you think you've had a heart attack, you're kind of frazzled, and the things will be in one ear and out the other for whatever the doctors and nurses are telling you. So having some sort of an ongoing care plan that tells you the things up front, but then also allows you to come back to a record so the doctor and patient are seeing the same things. This can really be transformational for making the healthcare system work better. So those are a couple examples, and really related to some of the core elements that we're working on at Thrive for democratizing healthcare. Is, yes, empowering patients, but also measuring and understanding well-being, and a big driver for well-being is trust. So anyway, we can get into that in a little bit. We've also been asked to give a quick update about what Thrive actually does, and some of our experiences through COVID, which has obviously been a real turbo boost for a whole lot of digital health companies around the world. And then a few words at the end around where this could go next. So we've got clinical, public health, enterprise are the 3 main areas that Thrive is active. We're a team of about 75 people based in Vancouver, but people scattered around the world. Probably half of the company I haven't met in person yet, because we've hired them since COVID started. On the clinical front, it's really all about helping people through surgical journeys, chronic pain. Public health is primarily COVID, where we work with the BC and the Canadian governments, as David was mentioning. Enterprise has been interesting, where it's been an evolution through COVID of helping with workplace testing, where we have a national partnership with Life Labs to do Thrive software with Life Labs PCR testing. We also have a national partnership with the Creative Construction Lab doing at home and in office rapid antigen testing on the Thrive platform. And so we're seeing this really interesting merging of public health with employee health and then running of the overall health system. So anyway, I won't bore you with this, but the idea is really the flow that we see for patients through a healthcare journey is so intake, which can be intake for a specialist visit or a surgery, but really gathering information up front, which could be patient. It's patient entered, but it could be from other data sources, helping to make decisions both for the patient and their family, but also on the clinical side. For example, we do risk of opioid addiction and frailty scores and risk of complications during and after surgery, and then care plans. And what's interesting with the care plans is this is how we got started with COVID, because the BC Ministry of Health used a Thrive Care Plan to make the BC COVID support app. That's I think we've got 600,000 or 700,000 British Columbians have the app and have been using it to help to guide them through COVID. And these care plans can be used in a whole lot of different situations, and including for tracking patient outcomes and all that. And I mentioned Thrive Workplace. That's all fine. Maybe I'll turn off my presentation, so it's here we go. So yeah, so I'll just spend the last couple minutes talking about a couple lessons learned from working through COVID and what things really did seem to accelerate it from our little perspective, and then what's slowing us down going forward. It really was quite striking, and I guess a lot of people saw this, but through March, so really for us it was March 14th to the end of March 2020, where there were a lot of big decisions made very quickly, and arguably from the experiences we saw, those decisions were actually seen with the best of time over time, were better than average decisions. So when it was a crisis mode, things happened quickly. Then there's a bit of a hangover where April, May, June of 2020, where it's like things caught up with them, and then the weight of making decisions started to come in. That's when the whole federal, provincial, territorial dynamic got a lot heavier, and it showed that our basically our whole federation doesn't work that well for crisis times in health, in terms of who's in charge of what. But then picking up again for sharing experiences and working together. It's really been a lot of pretty impressive stuff. In terms of lessons learned and going forward, probably the biggest problem that we see in terms of the acceleration of digital health, and would love to hear from the other panelists on this, is I don't know if the words are right, but overzealous privacy officials, and totally understand where they're coming from, because they're in positions typically where there's no upside to pushing things through faster, and if anything goes wrong on a privacy perspective, they're the ones who get in trouble. But really, I feel very strongly that what's important is having very strong privacy legislation, but then not having that be overinterpreted. And I've been on other panels where that's a whole area of discussion on its own. But it is very important to just allow these things to happen, and to give patients and families the ability to decide. Something we saw through COVID repeatedly at multiple levels of government, when there is an unwillingness of governments to even give citizens a choice of doing something that involved sensitive private information. And I feel very strongly that it's important to have rules that show how things work, and what's allowed and what's not. But also it's very important to allow people their own choices. And some people will not want to do anything, and that's okay, but a lot will. And, the downside of not allowing people to do some of these things meant, in our case, was, we were able to collect much less information that was very valuable to public health officials, particularly syndromic surveillance for tracking symptoms, which was a good leading indicator of where COVID was coming. We had some good data, but it could have been much better. But there was wariness around privacy. And then a couple other things, just to close out for important things to think about. One is the disjointed incentives. That's probably not new to anybody, but linking it back to the story at the beginning about having solution shops and value-added processes. There are a lot of incentives for hospitals to send people into solution shops, because even though it costs more, they often make more money. And then last thing is really just looking more carefully at the role of happiness and well-being into people's health overall. And we've, as a part of our software, we do see that it's more important to track someone's happiness and well-being than to know whether they smoke or not, in terms of seeing how resilient they're going to be through healthcare journeys. So happy to talk about that with anybody later, but that's an important thing that's missing from our healthcare system now, is except for talking about sorry, I've got a little dog in the background. Except for talking about actual depression, there's very little talk about each of us are always somewhere on a spectrum of happiness, and that really is important in how resilient we are through health journeys. So thank you very much, and back to you, David.
Great. Thanks very much, David, for that. Thanks for your perspective and thoughts on those issues, and in particular, giving us an insight into what Thrive is doing to contribute to the patient-caregiver relationship. Quite important. Thank you, David. So our next speaker is Handel Kim. Handel is co-founder and CEO of Variational AI, an AI for drug discovery startup based in Vancouver. Variational AI applies its proprietary state-of-the-art generative AI to rapidly discover novel small molecules that are optimized to be efficacious, safe, and synthesizable therapeutics for unmet medical needs. He has over 20 years of executive management experience and leadership from venture-backed startups and publicly listed technology companies in AI, machine learning, cloud, mobile embedded, and telecommunications software in Silicon Valley, Canada, and Asia Pacific. Handel is vice chair of the AI Network of British Columbia and a board director of the Digital Technology Supercluster and the United Way of the Lower Mainland. Handel, over to you.
You're just on mute still, Handel, by the way. Thanks.
Okay, can you hear me now? I seem to be of loop. Can people see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Hello?
Perfect.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much. Wonderful intro. I didn't know it was. It makes me sound really, really good. I'm just a BC boy trying to do some good here. My name is Handel Kim, as David said. Today, I'm going to introduce to you Raven 2, which is a project where we're using our AI platform for drug discovery, going after a target related to COVID-19. So just very quickly, Variational AI we're an AI platform-based drug discovery startup. We were founded in Vancouver in 2019. We have 5 co-founders and full-time employees. We have pre-seed funding from the UBC Seed Fund and revenues and non-dilutive funding from various engagements. And as was mentioned, we use AI to find novel optimized molecules for defined targets, and then we license them. So we're currently working on targets in oncology, CNS, and infectious disease. We have biochemical validation on 1 pilot and 2 more coming in the next 3 months. And today I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Raven 2, which is our digital technology supercluster project, the objective of which is to discover and commercialize novel small molecule antiviral for SARS-CoV-2. So in one sense, digital health is a very broad space. I guess the way you could think about it is that we take matter, in this case, small molecules, and we extract information from them, and then we manipulate this information, which is digital, and then we have to map it back into the space of actual molecules and then test them in a wet lab. So digitalization in this case is a fundamental accelerant and also an ability to overcome traditional limitations that exist in experimental chemistry or empirical science. What we really do is we use our generative AI to search through chemical space. And for people who are understanding of this concept, chemical space is a universe of drug-like molecules of about 10 to the 60 molecules. It's a terrifyingly huge number. Just to give you a field of reference, 10 to the 80 is the estimated number of atoms in the visible universe. So it's a massive space. The issue is that currently chemistry, biochemistry, when we talk about drug discovery, we're not really able to access a big swath of a chemical space. In fact, we probably on a good day might know the structure activity relationship or have synthesized maybe 1 billion of these molecules, which is effectively 0%. What we do is we search through this drug-like, chemical space, find optimized leads with all the properties that we're looking for, find molecules that bind to the target, in this case SARS-CoV-2, and we also do multi-parameter optimization, such that these are not just molecules that bind, but have all the properties that you would be looking for: pharmacokinetic properties, selectivity, potency, synthetic accessibility, etc. Everything that makes a drug a drug. What we do is we use AI to, instead of relying on brute force computation to search for this massive space of chemistry, what we do is we use AI in order to massively increase the segments of chemical space that can be searched, but we want to do it efficiently. And we use the machine learning to guide, to rapidly discover only the novel molecules with all the desired properties. So in effect, what we're doing is we're defining the drugs that we want by their properties, and then we train the algorithm to use existing data to find new molecules that haven't been discovered. What we're trying to do is redefine the unit economics of drug development. And as you can see here, drug development is a very expensive process and only getting more expensive. On average, depending on who you speak to, you're talking about over $1 billion in out of pocket and even more than $2 billion in capitalized costs. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take the preclinical drug discovery part and the first 3 phases, target to hit to lead, and lead optimization, and compress them. And compress them from about 4.5 years to less than 6 months. And we have a goal of reducing those costs from about $250 million to less than $1 million. So the origin story of what we're doing on Raven 2, funded by the Digital Technology Supercluster, is we started off with a feasibility project, because back when COVID happened, it was all hands on deck. And it was great that there was a program available for SMEs in this space, including us, in order to try and find rapid solutions. And of course, what you want to do is you want to try and repurpose a drug that's already been approved so that it can get through approval a lot quicker and hopefully improve patient outcomes. But what we did was we originally looked at repurposing already approved drugs to see if they would work for COVID. And we went through the process and we found that no repurposed drugs are really good for COVID. And I think that bears out in the industry. We had hydroxychloroquine, we had various other drugs that were already approved, and only one got emergency use authorization from Gilead, and the name escapes me because it's not really used very much. So on the back of that, what we did was we applied for and we got approval to fund Raven 2, and that was using our AI platform to do novel drug discovery. So instead of looking at the 5,000 or so approved drugs, we looked at the universe of drugs that hadn't been discovered yet. It was a national effort. We were the lead, and we worked in partnership with the University of British Columbia and the Vancouver Prostate Center and VGH, as well as Admari Bioinnovations. And each partner brought a critical piece of the commercialization and discovery component to help us try and find a small molecule therapeutic for COVID-19. So as of today, what we've done is we've used the AI, trained on a lot of data, and we've ordered these molecules, and we're currently waiting for them to come back after being synthesized, and then we'll throw them into the assay. And the great thing is that there is a BSL-3 facility and a live virus at UBC that we can test against. So that's set up. We're just waiting for the synthesized molecules to come in, and then Admari will provide medchem consultations as well as commercialization and licensing. And I just like to say that, you know, with us rolling into summer, with almost 70% of the people in British Columbia having at least their first shot, and vaccines rolling out in greater quantities, we're so grateful for that. Yet at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't need therapeutics, especially small molecule therapeutics, which are tablets or pills, to help those who already have symptoms, and also to decrease the severity and keep people out of ICUs. And if you look at the United States just last week, the Biden administration has invested $3 billion into antiviral development for COVID-19. We believe that this is of strategic importance to Canada. And so we think about Raven 2 as something protecting the future rather than fighting the past. And what I'd like to say is the lesson we should have learned is that had we continued and followed through on SARS back 15 years ago and developed vaccines and therapeutics, there's a good chance that we might have had some efficacious drugs for COVID-19 when it started. So I think that just because the threat goes away, it doesn't mean that we should take our eye off the ball. And I think that the longer we delay getting started, the later we get a drug, and so we're still full bore ahead. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much for that, Handel. Really interesting Raven 2, and good insight and perspective. A lot of food for thought there. Next speaker I'm going to be introducing is Deepak Kora. Deepak is the Chief Medical Officer of One Qubit. He is also a pediatric radiologist and a founding member of Pure Form Radiology. In addition, he is the Vice Chair of CAN Health Network, a national partnership dedicated to economic advancement of the Canadian healthcare system. Prior to these appointments, Deepak was the chair of the board of JUL, a Canadian Medical Association subsidiary. He also spent 5 years in Qatar with Sidra Medicine as the executive chairman of the Foundational Clinical Services Management Group, where he led teams to build several departments of the hospital. Deepak has served several medical and scientific societies, including the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. He received his MBA from HEC Paris, FR, and then followed by training in Calgary, and an MD from the University of Manitoba. He has had faculty appointments as associate professor at Cornell University and the University of Calgary. Over to you, Deepak.
Wow, thanks a lot for that intro, David. Much appreciated. I, like Handel, somewhat sheepishly shy away from some of those things. I'm going to share my screen here, which gives me great pleasure to talk to you guys a little bit about where we're going with technology and digital health. So here we go. We'll start right at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. Hi, everyone. So I'm here representing One Qubit. I'm the Chief Medical Officer, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the digital health revolution that we're experiencing right now in terms of machine learning and imaging diagnostics. One Qubit was started in 2012 as a company that was designed to look at and investigate the applications of quantum and advanced computing, particularly in the areas of algorithm design. The idea was to redefine what we currently in industry call intractable problems by looking at how do you take unique computational platforms, attach them to interesting algorithms, and produce a solution. The company right now has about 135, actually this is an old number, we're more like 150 people, and about 65 or 70 of them now have PhDs. We have 3 offices right now, one of them in Vancouver, which is our headquarters, a second in Ontario in Waterloo, and the third one is in Sherbrooke in Quebec. We have a number of industry partners that we work with, including all of the ones that you see on the right-hand side. And I joined the company about 3 years ago to build the health and life sciences vertical. So that brings me to sort of digital health. I think one of the greatest promises of digital health, as David had mentioned earlier during his keynote, was the whole idea of being able to create assets that can then be shared and can be used to prevent harm and to empower people. And that's really all about, significantly about data, how it's created, how it's used, and more importantly, how the results from that data can drive new data creation. So the way I look at the way things work typically in our health systems is we have this clinical data that's created usually from research. It generates evidence. That evidence then informs care, which then results in outcome, which then causes you to go out and get more research and clinical data, which then generates evidence. And you sort of have this circuitous loop. And what we are finding is that the evidence that gets generated and informs care, all of that data that gets created, some of it creates harm, which we know is sort of the third leading cause of death in the United States in healthcare. And then the second one is waste. Unfortunately, we don't do a very good job in healthcare of looking at both of those circles of this loop, and then using that, because harm obviously results in outcomes, and so does waste, and then using that to inform the evidence that we create. All of this information just becomes a bit overwhelming when you look at the amount of data that gets created every day in health systems. And so we definitely need algorithms to help us sort that data, because it's sort of well beyond our mental capabilities right now. Our mission at One Qubit right now in health is to figure out a mechanism of touching 1 billion lives. I'm a pediatric radiologist. I work every day in the clinical sphere, trying to take care of patients, and ultimately you can only touch one patient at a time. The people that you are seeing who have the discreet honor of presenting today are people who have invested their lives and time and effort in seeing how you can scale beyond one person to many people. And I myself am one of those people that would love to figure out a way in which we can touch many, many more people. Being scalable intelligence, and that's what we're hoping to be able to do. Now, why does this matter? So diagnostic imaging, obviously the costs continue to rise. Our reliance on diagnostic imaging, that's ultrasound, CT, MRI, X-ray, nuclear medicine, etc., is increasing dramatically. So our utilization increases and the costs increase. So there's a significant issue there. The second is the demand for imaging services is increasing. And so, unfortunately, our supply is not. And this is especially poignant given the recent COVID pandemic that we've had, as we've seen wait times dramatically escalate across the country. And of course, the Canadian economy is estimated to have lost about $3.5 billion in productivity in 2017 alone due to radiology service wait times. That's increased dramatically. If you look at some centers, like you could look in Ontario, they're 18 to 24 month wait lists for MRI and CT scans. So that's sort of a whole area of diagnostic imaging that's really important. But ultimately, we're physicians and healthcare providers, and we care about the patient. And this is what we don't want. We know mistakes are going to happen. Every day, mistakes happen. They happen. I make them. Everybody who practices medicine in some way, shape, or form, whether you're a nurse, you're a clerical person sitting at the front desk, or you're a physician, you're going to make mistakes. The real question is, how do you take those mistakes and minimize them? I started thinking about this quite hard about 12 years ago, and wondering about the application of computer science to this space of making mistakes. And I started thinking even more recently, about 3 years ago, about how do we do that in other industries? Take a look at this, right? If you walked on an airplane tomorrow and the captain in the cockpit waves at you and says, "Oh, hey, welcome, sir. It's just me today, and there's no co-pilot flying with me. How do you feel about that?" I think most of you would turn around and walk off that plane. I, for one, certainly would. And yet, in healthcare, we do this every day, right? As a practicing physician, I have no co-pilot. None, zero. I'm lucky if I can pick up the phone and call one of my colleagues and get some help. And unfortunately, in many situations, Dr. Google and my ancient old medical textbooks and a little bit of PubMed are my co-pilots. Nowhere do I have a really, truly intelligent, informed, trusted individual or technology to be able to do the work that I do, and to be able to incorporate all this enormous amount of data that I have to process every day. I think at 1QBit, and I think you talk to many people who are in the industry now, would agree that we see a world, a digital world, where the interpretation of every single diagnostic image will be augmented by machine learning technologies. I'm absolutely sure of that, right? And I see a future where it will be physically and actually probably from a medical legal perspective impossible for me to look at an imaging study without some kind of an AI co-pilot beside me. So in that vein, we proceeded with our first project to get our legs underneath us and build out our team. This was a project that has recently received supercluster funding. It's called X-Ray. It's a piece of technology that I'll show you in the next slide is a machine learning set of machine learning algorithms that are actually put together to look at chest radiographs and to be able to identify abnormalities in both the lung as well as the pleural space, which is the lining of the lung. We've used large representative clinical data from a health system in Canada. We've done a Canadian clinical trial, the only sort of single-blinded randomized control trial in the AI space. Our device has received Health Canada Class 3 medical device approval. It's the only AI algorithm in Canadian history in the radiology space to receive Health Canada approval. The technology is workflow integrated, so it doesn't disrupt the clinician, whether it happens to be a radiologist, an emergency doctor, a pulmonary doctor, when they're doing their work. And most importantly, it's vendor agnostic, which means that it can plug into any healthcare system, what's called a picture archiving and communication system, or PACS system. Here's an example of how the technology works. I'm sorry it's running a bit choppy platform, but if you look at the left-hand screen, that's the chest X-ray, the original one. And this is launching within a PACS viewer or an image viewer, a standard image viewer that you can find in every hospital system in Canada and actually in the United States. So on the right-hand side, you see the screen where the algorithm has identified where an abnormality is, and in this situation, the abnormality here is in the right lower lobe, and is highlighting that. The interesting thing is you can see the red bar moving across the top. That's actually the doctor and or the nurse practitioner controlling how the output of the algorithm is displayed. In other words, the confidence that the algorithm has. We have found that many of these algorithms that are existing in the world today are producing what are called binary outputs. And those binary outputs mean this is normal or abnormal. We wanted to put the control in the doctor's hands, and I think that's the future. Put the control in the hands of the physician and let them decide what's normal and what's abnormal, but show them the combined intelligence of a series of physician interpretations put together in a machine learning algorithm, and that's exactly what we've done here. So just to give you a quick example, here's our first foray into this was in when the first cases of COVID were produced, and we ran the original chest X-ray on the left, which was at day 4. The AI classifier on the right predicts no abnormality because there was no abnormality. And then at day 7 on the left-hand side, and the original chest X-ray, the report from the radiologist said no acute abnormality identified. On our algorithm, we say, at very low sensitivity, there is an abnormality identified at the bottom here. You can see towards the end, you get that little screen that pops up that shows you that overlay. And clearly, at day 9, which is 2 days later, there's now an abnormality exactly where we had seen an abnormality earlier with our algorithm. And then you move on to day 10, and on day 10, there's an abnormality that appears here where the previous examination, our algorithm showed an abnormality in that space. So we're very, very happy that our algorithm performs well. We've done it on COVID-19 pneumonias, and we've found that we have a 96% accuracy for identification of pneumonia in patients with COVID. We've then gone and said, well, how do we make these technologies available to people in places where they don't have these sophisticated IT systems? And so we ran a competition, or we were participating in a competition and won second place, actually. SIM is the Society of Informatics in Medicine. And we were able to create that entire algorithm to run on a $130 Raspberry Pi 4 computer. So I wanted to let you know that I was obviously extremely proud of our team for doing this, and this was done within 48 hours. So they were able to take our algorithm and take it away from a massive server infrastructure and make it run on a Raspberry Pi, and it ran very well. So our second supercluster means the future. It means that we recognize that we're able to do this. We recognize that there are mechanisms for making this very fast and repeatable. And so we decided we're going to build Iris, where X-ray was the first of a series of classifiers that will form a trusted co-pilot for clinicians. And we formed an industry consortium where we have many of the big IT players, GE, Philips, Konica Minolta, and then some of the health systems that we work with are Providence, Saskatchewan Health Authority, and Trillium Health Partners. And the UBC is our academic partner, and we lead this consortium. It's a super exciting consortium that comes together to produce 20 of these classifiers over the next 24 months, and launch them into the sphere of creating a comprehensive AI co-pilot. We also are doing an AI in Healthcare Council, a national council where we were assembling people from around the country, experts in this sphere, to have a conversation, an intelligent conversation on the impact of these technologies, particularly in the regulatory environment. And hopefully we'll be able to kickstart, put Canada in a significant leadership position globally for AI in healthcare. With the final, mission, and that is to touch 1 billion lives. That's what I have to say for today. I hope you found this interesting, and I'd be love to have some conversations with many of you as we move into the shared rooms.
Thanks very much, Deepak, and thanks for giving us that insight into what 1QBit's doing. Very exciting projects and activities. Thanks for that so much. Our next speaker is Elliot Stone. Elliot is the CEO and co-founder of Alavida, the Canadian market leader in virtual substance use treatment. Early in his career, Elliot saw people he loved prevented from getting the help they needed and noticed that when treatment was offered, it was often ineffective or too expensive. Fueled by an empathetic curiosity, Elliot has made it his mission to make evidence-based, non-judgmental care available without barriers to people struggling with substance abuse. And Alavida has helped over 79% of patients regain control over an addiction. With that, over to you, Elliot.
Thank you, David. And hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. At Alavida, our mission is to make comprehensive addiction treatment simple for employers because we think employers play a critical role in providing broad access to modern treatment options and bringing this area of medicine into the 21st century. And so last year, in response to, we partnered with the Digital Technology Supercluster to provide service to critical health workers. And the project goals were simple. It was to move into a space where traditionally treatment is not offered unless there's a disability case in play, and offer them evidence-based treatment, pre-disability, 100% confidential. And at the same time, build a strong business case for the widespread adoption of this type of treatment into employee benefit plans. And to do this, we pulled together a consortium of union that was made up of 4 major healthcare worker unions. The employer was Fraser Health in this case, and the benefits provider. And I think, just this consortium coming to the table and talking about substance use is a monumental achievement in itself. And it's ultimately what made this project so successful. I'm confident in that. It's historically, substance use disorder is a contentious area, and that conflict in the past has sometimes and often led to inaction. And so to the credit of, I think, the individuals working in each one of these organizations, the change makers here, I think everyone rallied behind this idea of, if not now, then when, for improving the substance use treatment options for healthcare workers. What a year they had, and how much did they need an additional support in response to COVID. And so from the Alavita side, we had to make really rapid enhancements to our product. And this was done in sort of three major areas. And really, it was psychoeducational questionnaires so that we were engaging a population very broadly and not only collecting information, but also educating them about substance use and or the treatment options available. And then we created a virtual companion, Sarah, who you saw in the video, as well as specific ICBT content modules that were directed at healthcare workers. And all of this was really to guide the treatment process and to make it a more immersive experience, more engaging for this particular population. And our campaign was a broad communication because, again, in an area like substance use disorder, you can't sort of say this is a solution for you, Bob, and you, Steve. You really have to engage broadly in order to destigmatize. And we did that. We went out across multiple channels, and we ultimately were able to get thousands of people to share how they were coping with the pandemic, and what role substance was playing in their lives or in the lives of their loved ones. And it was this message of sort of Alavita is for everyone. And whether you have a problem today or not, or it's someone at home. And we were able to produce a really robust data set that showed, Fraser Health in this case and the unions, what impact substance use was actually having on a population that filled a void, that really information that they'd never seen before. And we did all of this, launching to ultimately a group of over 34,000 and receiving no negative feedback, which for us is quite a feat. I mean, we're talking about something that's quite a contentious topic in traditionally. A lot of people are opinionated about substance use and substance use treatment, and to go out and communicate broadly to over 30,000 people and have not a single piece of negative feedback was a tremendous feat. And I think partly due to the consortium that we pulled together. And so our specific targets for this project were to engage the population. We wanted to engage 10% of the population in the campaign. And we wanted to increase the number of people receiving substance use treatment by 20% over the year prior. And at the same time, we wanted to decrease disability costs year over year. So we want to drive up the number of people who are actually receiving specialized treatment, but at the same time, drive down the cost of providing that treatment by removing the disability requirement. And this has been an overwhelming success. On the engagement front, in the proof of concept, we were able to achieve our goal by more than 2.5 times, or by 2.5 times, almost on the dot. And in terms of increasing the number of people engaged in substance use treatment, our goal of 20% is over 500% and still climbing. And so our final goal of decreasing the disability costs year over year, we have an ongoing kind of sidecar project with an independent research group, Digital Health Circle, who is helping us quantify that in a year over year as we move forward. We're sort of still collecting the data over the next 6 to 12 months that will allow us to report that clearly back to the project stakeholders. And it's important to note here that all of the individuals that receive treatment through this project would not have had access otherwise. Again, this is a world where if you have a substance use problem and you come forward, you effectively are sent home in a traditional sense. And we were offering, we were able to reach quite a number of people here and actually change their individual lives. So the impact on a personal level was tremendous. And the final stakeholder group meeting with this group was probably one of the more memorable and better experiences I will have this year. It was just a tremendous success, sort of all around the table. And in parallel, just in wrapping up here, the commercialization of this project and our secondary goal of sort of providing a business case for this to be built in, and move substance use from this other thing that's not covered by employee benefits into the normal world of carpal tunnel or physio or anything else that you would do where you wouldn't need to involve your employer, has been a success as well. In about 6 months, we've generated, or we've gone from basically zero to $750,000 in recurring revenue by selling into mid-market insurance carriers and third-party administrators. And we're very optimistic about the continued growth here and just about changing Canada's culture around substance use treatment in a very, very positive way. So that's it from my side, and I'm happy to have any questions if anybody has any.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Elliot, and great insight for the great work that Alavita is doing. Thanks very much for that. So our next presenter is Elaine Wadler. Elaine is a director of programs at the Digital Technology Supercluster. Elaine has over 20 years of experience as a health sciences executive across a broad range of organizations, including multinationals, SMEs, and nonprofits. Her background includes positions at Canadian Biotech QLT as VP of Corporate Communications, Investor Relations, and Business Development, and senior positions in market research and brand management with AbbVie, formerly Abbott Laboratories. Before joining the Digital Supercluster, she was with Admare Bio Innovations, formerly Accelerex Health Sciences Accelerator, where she provided entrepreneurial support and programming to early stage companies. In addition to her corporate experience, Elaine has enjoyed success as a business consultant and as an entrepreneur, having created, run, and sold a multi-location retail business. Currently, she acts as a mentor and advisor for various organizations, providing leadership, strategic planning, business development, marketing, and communications guidance. She received her bachelor's degree in biochemistry from the University of Alberta and an MBA from the University of British Columbia. Over to you, Elaine.
David, just let me get the screen going. Great. Hopefully you can all hear me. First, I'd like to thank Handel, Elliot, and Deepak for presenting their projects today. Those are just a few of the stellar projects that we're so proud to be supporting at the Digital Supercluster. I'm just going to take the next 5 minutes or so to give you some background on the organization and tell you just a little bit more about our health portfolio. In case you aren't familiar with us, the Digital Supercluster is based in Vancouver, and it's one of a network of 5 innovation superclusters across the country. And it's part of a program that was initiated by the Canadian government back in 2017 to create a new model for innovation. The goal is really to bring together public and private sectors by investing in projects that involve a broad consortium and typically include a research partner, a mix of big and small companies in the roles of tech lead, co-development partners, service providers, and also potential customers or adopters. And it's what we like to call innovative collaboration. And it really is the essence behind the supercluster. As one of our members so aptly described it, the benefit isn't so much the funding as it is the opportunity to build something you just couldn't do on your own. So our mandate, therefore, is really to accelerate the success of Canadian companies by solving societal problems through the development, the deployment, and the scaling of Canadian-made digital technologies. We're a source for new projects, a source for new project ideas, and as well as funding. And because our investments have to be industry matched, we leverage those investments from multiple parties in a coordinated way to reduce risk and lower individual development costs. We're proud to say that our investment to date of $142 million has attracted an additional $166 million from industry sources. Now, we may be based in BC, but our membership and investments are pan-Canadian. We have over 950 organizations as part of our membership, and 300 of those are actively engaged in an ongoing project today, 90% of which are SMEs. There are different levels of membership. You can start member, which is free. That allows you to explore collaboration opportunities with other members and projects and attend events and engage on our member portal and submit project ideas along with full members. In this first quarter of this year, we did complete our first investment mandate, so there's no open call for projects at this time, but we are actively working with the federal government to secure additional funding. We have 3 programs. The first is capacity building, where we're focused on talent and talent development. We partner with employers, educators, and community organizations to build that job-ready digital talent. Our flagship program we call Technology Leadership, and that's where we're co-investing in projects and digital technologies to solve issues in healthcare, climate change in the environment, and industrial sectors. And then last year when the pandemic hit, we created a 3rd program as a response and also to mitigate future risks and accelerate the economic recovery. This program was all about speed and the ability to bring teams together really quickly to solve some of those pressing issues. And so for this program, we had special investment provisions and flexibility so projects could get underway quickly. And so that may have been smaller consortiums and higher co-investment rates from the supercluster. That COVID program is substantial. There's 33 projects, I believe, out of 600 proposals, and definitely kept us all out of trouble last year. But it's truly amazing to see a lot of these projects as they come to closure, the impact that they're having, and to see the tech launched into the world. We are the only supercluster that has a focus in health, and between the health projects in our tech leadership umbrella, as well as the COVID program, it's actually where the majority of our investments have been made. This just looks a little bit closer at our health portfolio. Projects tend to fall into these 7 categories, the largest being AI-enabled diagnostics and treatment, and includes the projects that Handel and Deepak just presented. They're perfect examples. Moving on to clinical decision support, these are projects that aid providers in delivering healthcare that doesn't utilize AI. As an example, we have a company called DNA Stack based in Ontario that's developing a platform that can handle large volumes of genomic sequencing data and enable sharing of that data to both researchers and decision makers. The project's focused on COVID-19 data, and solution is now being used as a national data sharing platform to enable variant surveillance across the country. That same platform is being adapted into another project that we recently announced called the Autism Sharing Initiative, which is where the first federated and fully protected global network for sharing genomics and biomedical data related to autism is being built. Moving down to mental health and wellness, you've already heard about the wonderful impact that Elevida's virtual online addiction treatment program is having. Another BC company, Starling Minds, is leveraging their suite of best practice digital mental health tools to develop programs specifically for healthcare workers and teachers, particularly given the high mental burdens that they've faced over the past year with the pandemic. The digital health at home category includes projects that can be used to enhance healthcare at and from home, and also includes remote monitoring. And projects in this category range from using robots in long-term care settings to doing remote work using tools like digital stethoscopes and biometric monitoring, to projects by Swift Medical, which is developing a remote virtual wound care platform. We have 7 projects that will help us get back to work safely under the bucket community and workplace safety. Local company Gemina Labs has developed a solution called TestPoint, which pairs a physical rapid COVID test with a mobile app to provide a digital risk management system for workplaces. We have another company, BioConnect, that's developed a digital COVID screening tool incorporating both a wellness declaration and a temperature scanner, and can be integrated into existing key card access systems. In terms of resource optimization, we've got 6 projects helping to create efficiencies in healthcare delivery. Projects like Altus Labs, where they're developing software to enable hospitals to better manage and predict ICU capacity. And of course, we have one project in the skilling bucket, which is a digital training platform being led by BCIT's training center. I could go on and talk about a lot of the projects, and that's just a few of them. We've got 82, so tons more where that came from. If you'd like to learn more about any of these projects, there are summaries on our website, or feel free to contact me. I'm also happy to make connections with any of the companies leading these great projects. I'll just take one more second to wrap up, and just to echo David's comments earlier about privacy and access to data. I mean, I really feel like the technology is there, but definitely one of the bigger challenges we face is in accessing that data. And if we can all work together as an industry to keep moving that forward with government bodies, I think we'll see leaps and bounds and improvement in our healthcare system. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Elaine. Thanks in particular for a good overview of what the supercluster is doing and some of its important projects and initiatives. And some of the benefactors haven't given their presentation earlier, so it's great. Our last presenter today is Jason Robertson. Jason is a co-founder of Nimbus Synergies, a venture capital firm and Canadian leader in health technology investments. As Vice President of Investments, Jason leads early stage financings in innovative health technology companies and then leverages his professional experience to help these companies scale. Since Nimbus's founding in 2017, Jason has led investments in 9 BC-based companies, deploying almost $12 million. In January 2020, portfolio company Blue Mesa Health was acquired by Virgin Pulse. As Nimbus's first exit, this was a tremendous accomplishment, and Jason served as a significant contributor through his role as a board director. Jason currently serves as a board director of Alavida Health and Life Booster, and board observer for Claris Healthcare and Xenia Technologies. Over to you, Jason.
Thanks so much, David, for that kind introduction. I have a lot of learnings that I would like to share with you in a short amount of time, but I understand that I'm standing between you and our virtual networking. But I ultimately want to leave you today having a greater appreciation of the magnitude of the challenges in front of us in healthcare. And I think why we feel digital health is perhaps the single most important paradigm to address those challenges. So let me break down and give you a state of play. Why do we care? In the next decade, the last of the baby boomers will retire, further straining our already strained healthcare systems globally. As we get older, we need more healthcare at increasing costs. In the US, annual healthcare costs double once you hit 45, and double again by the time you hit 65. The US alone will spend more than $4 trillion on healthcare this year, roughly $11,000 per person, and by far the most in the world, and more than 5 times the next largest spender, if you can believe that, which happens to be China with 3 times the population. And before you jump up and think that perhaps what you hear in the media is true with prescription drugs represent less than 10% of that total spending. US per capita healthcare spending is more than 2 times other developed nations, and yet it is consistently ranked as having one of the worst healthcare systems. And before we pat ourselves too much on the back as Canadians, we're right there behind them. So what really needs fixing? 60% of adults have a chronic disease, and this is believed to account for a significant majority, upwards of 90% of healthcare spending. 40% have at least 2 chronic diseases, and on top of that, another 40% of Americans are obese, the highest in the developed world. This was before the pandemic. 20% of adults experienced mental illness, and less than 40% received treatment. Those stats have skyrocketed through the last year, as you can imagine. Waste accounts for more than 20% of our healthcare costs. But the cost of healthcare isn't just about the dollars. As Deepak mentioned, medical error is the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. And these are just some of the areas that we need to address. The solutions to these problems, we believe, will drive value creation in an unprecedented new class of healthcare disruption. However, scaling innovation requires capital. And I'm here to tell you today, I think that's good news for us. And that's because 2020 was the 4th straight consecutive year of growth in venture capital fundraising, with more than $17 billion flowing into new VC funds. And those funds are twice as large as they were the year prior. Funding of innovative digital health companies also doubled in 2020, hitting a record high of $14 billion. And so far this year, the number has doubled again in Q1, if you can believe it. Digital health doubled quarter over quarter to almost $7 billion in new investments. And again, digital health has had the most deals in the last 3 quarters, outpacing every other sector, including fintech. Now in BC, Nimbus is working to compile this data. However, our early analysis suggests that BC digital health companies receive about 1 of every $2 invested in the sector in Canada, punching well above our weight, as you can see. We believe this is probably due to the confluence of our strong tech and life sciences sectors, and is evidenced really by the companies that I think you've had the privilege of seeing before you today. So how will we fix it? As we've heard today, many new technologies are enabling and accelerating the transformation of our healthcare system, and together will build the foundation of our future. AI, blockchain, NLP, 5G, IoT are just some of the areas that we expect to have massive changes and improvements to our healthcare moving forward. And these technologies are driving VC funding in a number of different areas. As you can see, most recently in this last quarter, on-demand healthcare services topped the area of the most active invested value propositions, followed closely by research and development catalysts. And so that would be stuff like variational AI, where AI and ML is coming together to help us both increase the efficacy of the pharmaceuticals that we are developing at a fraction of the cost and time. And when we think of areas that are top funded clinical indications, where are we putting our most energies to? I apologize about the blurriness of the slide, is mental health. Obviously, first and foremost, and remains a top factor. Primary care has moved up, but as you noticed, and I think as Elliot has made a compelling argument for, substance use has moved quickly up to third place. So I think, it begs the question, what makes a compelling digital health investment? And I guess I wanted to take a moment to sort of share some of our learnings over the last couple of years, supporting innovators like yourselves and others in the ecosystem. And I think the first and foremost is understanding what a venture's supportable go-to-market strategy looks like. The market is changing dramatically as we speak. Companies are consolidating. Big questions remain in terms of who owns a customer. And so as we see some of these larger health platforms consolidate both in Canada and the US, you need to understand how you're going to go to market, whether you can do it directly alone or whether you need to partner, and understanding, again, what are the roles of incentives within those go-to-market strategies. We also believe that perhaps a few years ago, internal data or white paper data would be sufficient, but moving forward, we very much see that published, peer-reviewed clinical data will be critical to justify and support your value propositions. And it's not just enough to show efficacy, you really need to show value for money and return on investment. And finally, as I sort of alluded to in the opening, the US healthcare market remains by far the largest in the world. And so even if we, as Canadian innovators, leverage all the benefits and resources that we get from being Canadian, we still need to understand how to pivot or expand or grow our innovations, our products and solutions into the US marketplace. So there's a couple of things that I think others have done a much better job of, and that I won't belabor too much here. But a couple of things I think we still need to understand better as we look to the future of digital health transformation. And one is how much data. And so if you think of something like your blood pressure, you used to get your blood pressure once a year. And so we can do it now with digital technology more frequently. But what's the right amount of measurement? Is it once a month? Once a week, once a day, once an hour? And so we really need to understand how much data do we actually need to change our behaviors and to actually influence the outcomes preventatively and proactively of our healthcare. Deepak did a great job talking about this. As David alluded to earlier, and Elaine, how do we think about trust and privacy of that data? Who do we trust with our data to use it? How do we keep it private? And how do we enable sharing of that data to the critical healthcare providers that we need on a selective basis? We don't necessarily need to share all of our data. We just need to share some of that. Things like blockchain may be important in that. How do we ensure equal access to all? And how do we use digital health to address the social determinants of health? How do we use the ability to access the entire population and lower costs to do that? And fundamentally, then, what do we think of new models of healthcare delivery? Healthcare is optimized for acute care at the moment. And so how do we transition and think about that model, moving to a more persistent and proactive care model? And who will be the leaders of that? Will this be your primary care physician, or will it be a tech company like Thrive who's going to be leading those care coordination efforts? So with that, and leaving you with those provocative questions to move into your networking sessions to discuss, we at Nimbus are working tirelessly to support innovators at the forefront of this digital health transformation. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I want to thank David Frost for his opening remarks and to thank all of our speakers for their very insightful presentations today. David Helliwell, Deepak Kura, Handel Kim, Jason Robertson, Elliot Stone, and Elaine Wadler. And also a big thanks to our sponsor, McCarthy Tetro and David Frost, partner. And also wanted to invite all of you to attend our upcoming events. We take a little pause over the summer, but we will be back in September. Our first event of the year will be September 16th, our AGM, followed by one of our largest events of the year, which is on September the 23rd, which is the 23rd Annual Life Sciences BC Awards presented by Ferris. And that's going to be on Zoom. And also in November, the 3rd and 4th, we will be having the Investor Summit. Many people I know will be quite excited to get back in person, and we will be doing in-person events again as soon as it is safe to do so, and please stay tuned for further details on that. And also like to thank all of our annual sponsors. We're very grateful for your continued support, and we really want to thank all of our sponsors for staying with us this year. It's been a very interesting year since April of last year, and want to thank all of our sponsors for their support, all of our members, all of you who attended the event today, and it is an amazing sector to be a part of, and I'm very proud to work in the sector. So have a wonderful summer, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the fall. I encourage you now to stay for the networking session. And to move to the front of the room, and then reminder, please turn on your cameras and your microphone, and then we will have probably around 2 rounds at about 8 minutes each. So thank you again, and have a wonderful summer, and we'll see you in the fall. Take care. Bye-bye.